I'm Lisa with Henrico Recreation and Parks. In this episode, our history team is going to explore some family-owned cemeteries that are now on our historical properties scattered throughout the county. In the past, many small family cemeteries were a common thing throughout Henrico County. Why, you might wonder? Well, there were multiple reasons for this. Up until fairly recently, in the last few decades, Henrico retained much of its rural and agricultural roots. The city of Richmond did offer burial locations. As historic St. John's Church began filling up, by 1820 they added Shockoe Hill Cemetery, followed by Oakwood Cemetery in 1854. But that was still quite a ways away for many families to go to. They had to consider time, distance, expense, the ability to gather extended family and friends for the funeral. So that is one of the many reasons why it was quite common to bury your family on your own property. Also, Victorian mourning traditions became increasingly more elaborate as the 1800s progressed, and into the 1900s, it still retained a lot of the traditions. Mourning practices became so elaborate that it was expected for folks to be able to care for their loved one's grave quite often. So having a family cemetery next to where your family lived was a very convenient way to maintain these proper Victorian etiquette mourning traditions.
Hi, I'm Kim, and we're at the Nuckols Family Cemetery, which is located on the Nuckols Farm, which is part of Henrico Recreation and Parks complement of historic properties. The Nuckols Farm was in the family beginning in 1849 when Israel Nuckols purchased 274 acres. The family resided on the property until 1972. The family farmed the land over the years. They had a successful dairy operation, they grew tobacco, and they also bought and sold mules. Several generations of the Nuckols family are buried here at the cemetery. Jacob Nuckols and his wife Mildred are buried here. Jacob was born in 1836 and died in 1910. His wife was born in 1832 and she died in 1902. Cortland Nuckols, who was the son of Jacob and Mildred, is also buried here. He was born in 1967 and he died in 1937. He was the last one interred here at the cemetery. Harriet Nuckols was Cortland's wife, and she was born in 1877 and she died in 1930. Sadly, they lost a daughter to the Spanish flu. She is also buried here. Her name was Mildred Lucille Nuckols, and she died in 1919. The sixth grave belongs to Emma J. Nuckols, who died in 1902. In addition to the identified graves, there are several unmarked graves here at Nuckols.
Hey everybody, this is Bryce. If you've ever driven down Mountain Road or had the opportunity to visit the Virginia Randolph Museum, you may have noticed this lone headstone standing out in the schoolyard. You may have asked yourself, is there anybody actually buried here? And if so, why are they buried in the middle of a schoolyard? This is actually the final resting place of Miss Virginia Estelle Randolph. Notice I said final resting place. After a 57-year career in education, most of it spent right here at this school, Mrs. Randolph finally retired in 1949, and in 1958 she passed away. She was originally interred at Evergreen Cemetery in the east end of Henrico. Several years after her death, the Virginia Randolph Foundation, along with the Henrico County School Board, decided to honor her life and legacy with the creation of this museum you see here today. Shortly before the dedication of the museum in 1970, the school board, along with the Virginia Randolph Foundation, received permission to remove Mrs. Randolph from Evergreen Cemetery and bring her here to the place where she spent most of her life. The foundation had this headstone made and is in charge of the perpetual care of the cemetery. They have been maintaining this plot for the last 50 years. The original headstone is currently curated within the museum.
Hi, I'm Julian, and we're here at the cemetery at Meadow Farm. This cemetery has been the final resting place for the Shepherd family for several generations. Although unmarked, there are 7 known graves in this family cemetery. The earliest known grave in the family cemetery belongs to Isabella Shepherd, who died in 1874. Her sisters Helen Virginia and Nanny Mosby Shepherd were both buried here in 1876. Her parents, Dr. John Shepherd and Virginia Young Shepherd, were interred in 1877 and 1889, respectively. But the most recent of family burials belongs to Emily Florence Shepherd Kamen in 1937, following the burial of her husband, Henry Kamen, in 1893.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bob. I'm here on the Hopkins Family Cemetery located on Walkerton Tavern in the Glen Allen area. First, a little bit of biographical information about the family. Frances Hopkins, or Fanny as she is known, purchased the property 1857. She was in her 60s at this time and moved into the property with several of her grown children, which several of them are buried here, along with one of their spouses. So in the Hopkins Cemetery, we have 7 people that are buried here. I have 2 Civil War soldiers. Off to my left, your right, we have George Hopkins. He was actually one of the Civil War soldiers that was taken prisoner here at the property during the Battle of Yellow Tavern. And also over here we have Erasmus Hopkins, who also fought in the Civil War. We also have 2 postmasters who served as the postmaster of the Glen Allen Post Office, and they operated actually out of the basement of Walkerton Tavern. We have Erasmus Hopkins over here, and then his sister Josephine Hopkins. And several of the other family members, we haven't learned a little bit, anything about their history, but hopefully one day we'll find out more about them. Here at the Hopkins Cemetery, there's a few unusual characteristics about the cemetery. As I mentioned, there are 7 people buried here, but if you look around, there's only 4 markers. And so what is happening here is we have 4 markers facing the south, and then if you look on the south side of the markers, we have 3 additional markers with 1 marker that is empty. And so when we don't know the truth, we try to figure out the best guess. And we've talked with several cemetery historians, and what they think is that this marker that is empty was going to be reserved for a future burial that did never happen. If you look at the 4 markers, you notice that they're exactly the same style and the same condition. Now, the first burial was 1866. The last burial is 1905. So that's almost a 50-year difference. But then how in the world can the markers be all in the same style and condition? Again, the cemetery historians think that the markers are actually placed here at the same time. And then the markers of the names and their dates were placed within the brick markers. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little tour of some of the Henrico County owned properties on the western side of the county. On behalf of me and the rest of the History Department, thank you and hope to see you again soon.